que está sentado allá. Nosotros vamos a volar a los Estados Unidos y con su permisión voy a hablar normalmente aquí en inglés porque es mucho más fácil de comunicar los conceptos para mí en inglés porque he escrito el libro en inglés. Pero para mí, si ustedes quieren hablar o preguntarme preguntas o algo así en español, normalmente voy a entender. Si no, estoy seguro que hay alguien aquí que va a ayudarme con las preguntas. Pero tenemos unas personas un poco más pequeños que estamos pensando, entonces es una charla, una plática aquí. Entonces, tengo slides y voy a usarlos, pero a mí no me importa si vamos a terminar todos los slides. Lo que es más importante para mí es que tenemos una buena conversación sobre el tema. Entonces, voy a empezar, pero en esta presentación no tenemos que esperar hasta el fin para preguntar algo. Si estás pensando en algo y quiero preguntarme antes, por favor, es una conversación. What about in Spanish? This is my background. So, my background is software engineering, computer science. My degrees are all in computer science. I've been doing this for a long time. If you're a technical person and you're old enough to remember small talk, I come from the small talk community in late 1980s. I worked with a company in California called Workplace Systems. We brought small talk out of the research labs at Xerox PARC, and we formed a company to bring object-oriented technology to the marketplace. So I come from that world. I've been doing Agile since the early 1990s. Scrum, formally since 2000. At that time, I worked for a new company, startup called Genomica. We built software for statistical genetics, some sophisticated life sciences stuff. I ended up inheriting a 90-person team. It wasn't functioning all that well, and we decided to use Scrum, and that worked better for us. So I've been using Scrum since 2000, so a bit over 19 years. And for the past 12 years now, full-time, what I do is travel around the world. I teach classes in Scrum, Kanban, and I do coaching with companies. So many weeks in a month, I'm usually traveling somewhere, not at home, doing classes or coaching. So that's my background. Ernesto was kind enough to mention my book. Don't be impressed, I wrote it in English. They just translated it into 9 other languages. Unfortunately, todavía no hay una traducción en español. Pero recibí un mensaje ayer de una chica que está estudiando en la Canadá que quiere traducir, gracias, en el español, tal vez. This is the agenda. We won't get through all of this with our time, but that's okay. As I said, it was the conversation I wanted to have. So I want to talk about some traditional approaches to how companies transition. See, I spend all this time out with different companies, and I've helped large companies transition to Agile. Companies, some of which you may have heard of, like Fitbit. So I do all the training and coaching for Fitbit. I've done it for companies like Audible, part of Amazon, large banks. So I get to see a lot of what different companies are doing. And my goal is to try to communicate some of what I see. And so talk about traditional approaches, then Agile approaches to transitioning. And then there's all these scaling frameworks, SAFe, less, right? Scrum at scale, things like this. I want to talk about how we use them as part of transitioning to Agile. Then I want to talk about the scope of the transition, how big is the transition. And then This is organizing around a unit of focus. I'll need to define that when we get there. Large companies have to operate in a hybrid way. They will not immediately transition to Agile completely at the beginning. It would be too big a step to make. So we'll talk about what it means here. And we probably won't get to these topics here, but this would talk about the role of training and coaching and how do you measure the transition, how are we doing. ¿Preguntas en este momento? Okay. Is my English understandable?
Yes.
Okay. Agile's a journey. It's not a destination. So when I hear people say, we want to become Agile, as if it's something, it's una meta, it's something I can achieve. It's like, it's not. It's a journey. It's like saying, I want to be flexible, right? I hope each day I'm a little bit more flexible. I don't know that I ever achieve flexibility. Each day I want to be a little bit more agile. I don't know that I ever become agile that way. So it's a journey. That's how I'll present this. Waterfall, right? Analysis, design, coding, testing, operations. If you think about this, many people who believe, if you do Agile, then we believe in Agile, you will not get, for example, the requirements correct on the first day. Let me ask a question. On the first day of the project, I'll make a statement. I want to see if you agree. You can say yes or no. On the first day of the project, that's the day we'll have the worst possible knowledge we will ever have about that project. Isn't it fair to assume every day after will be a little bit smarter and not a little bit dumber about this project?
Mm-hmm.
See?
Yes.
Okay. So that's this line. Our knowledge, cumulative knowledge, increases over time. At the end of the project, we have very good knowledge. We just finished the project. So a lot of people believe that in a waterfall world, the solid line is the quantity of requirements that are put together over a period of time. In waterfall, isn't the goal to create the entire requirements document right at the very beginning?
Mm-hmm.
So at the point in time when we have the worst knowledge we will ever have, you need to put together the complete, correct, and unchanging statement of requirements. Good luck. All right? That's a huge gap. But that's exactly what I see companies trying to do when they want to transition to Agile. On the first day, I'll get a call saying, will you help my company transition? And on the first day, they want the complete plan of everything on how to do this. This is what they're looking for. This is a traditional approach to transition. First thing, current assessment. ¿Dónde estamos ahorita? Where do we want to be? What's the destination? Gap analysis. The difference between aquí and allá, here and there. And then a plan for how we'll get from here to there, and then execute. But again, it assumes you know the destination. And I said that Agile's a journey, not a destination. So it presumes that you can define the target, and you can't. So that's traditional. And it assumes you can get everything right. I want to show you a different approach. By the way, did you agree with this? This is the traditional approach? ¿Hay preguntas? So how do we do this in an Agile way? These are the core Agile principles, the foundation of agility. these are just names for the different categories of principles. My goal isn't to define all these here. This is, when I was writing my book, this is chapter 3, all the principles of agility. What I'm trying to suggest is this. These principles provide the foundation for how to transition Agile. So we use Agile to adopt Agile. Why would you use waterfall to adopt Agile? You should use Agile principles to help adopt Agile. That's the approach I want to talk about. And with that approach, you could have no details, complete details. Right? The waterfall approach would be try to define everything up front, complete, correct, unchanging, of everything you want to do, all the documents, a full plan. Companies will call me up and ask for a project plan for all the tasks that they should do to transition to Agile. This is ridiculous. You can't do that. It's like trying to write the requirements document for a brand new system on the first day when we have the worst knowledge. You can't do it. Of course, no details doesn't feel comfortable either. So the reality is somewhere in between, the extremes. So, we'll take this further. It's about balance. Agile tries to balance predictive, upfront work with adaptive, just-in-time work. People hear predictive upfront, they think waterfall. They hear adaptive, just-in-time, they think Agile. What I'm trying to suggest with this seesaw, teeter-totter type toy is that if you're heavy on either side, you'll be unhappy. If you try to be overly predictive, you'll just be guessing. If you do nothing up front, try to do everything just in time, it'll be chaotic to do that. You have to find balance between the two. I'm going to show you how I think we find this. Questions? Go forward.
How do you manage the budget?
So the budget for the overall transition?
The company has a limited budget.
Mm-hmm.
But if you work in time and material, you are maybe it's not a convenient way for the company, and the company their way of manage their budgets in a fixed way.
Yes. So I agree. Most companies ask for a fixed price. Right? How much will it cost to help transition everything to Agile? And the answer that I give them is, I don't know. I can't answer that question. At the point in time when we know the least information, they want a detailed budget. That would require the full project plan, knowing all the people that would be involved. I don't know that up front. So we need to learn together. So how do you get them to budget for this? They should budget incrementally. Budget to achieve a first milestone. And then if they like our progress, then budget for the next milestone. And that way, at any point, they can decide if they want to spend more or less money, right, to do this. But up front, if they say, how much will this cost? The only truthful answer I can give is, I don't know. I don't know what the cost is. And if they're looking for that number, they'll go to a company that will give them that number, a company that will help them transition. And the number will always be wrong. Do your companies do fixed price contracts?
They have an annual budget.
They have an annual budget, right, that they want to spend. That's fine. I'm okay with companies knowing, here's how much we want to spend. But in order to determine, since I don't know what the final destination is, what would the budget be for? It's a journey. So I'm budgeting for the journey, not for the final destination. So to tell them the full budget, I can't. I can tell them the first step along the journey I want to take and how much money. I can give certain answers. For example, at one company, they wanted me to train 700 people. I can tell them the cost to do that. If that's all they want to do, it's like train 700 people, I can tell them exactly what that will cost. But then they ask questions like, oh, how much coaching time is required? And how many other people will we need? That's a question that can't be answered up front. So certain things, yes, other things, no, on the budget. By the way, that last section on measuring the transition was on that piece. So if we have time, we can go further. ¿Otras preguntas? Okay. There are two types of uncertainty. Ends uncertainty, means uncertainty. Ends uncertainty, where do we want to end? Where do we want to get? Means uncertainty, how do we get there? Waterfall approach tries to eliminate all of one uncertainty before it addresses any of the other. In Waterfall, we write the full requirements document. That's a description of where we want to get. Then we come up with a plan of how we'll get there. In Agile, it's a journey, right? So we simultaneously look to reduce both uncertainties. In English, the expression I like is, we learn into it. Cada día entendemos más que el día antes. Right? We're learning each day a little bit more about the problem. That's how we'll do the Agile transition. In many of the companies that I work with, we actually do Agile at the executive level. Remember, we use Agile to adopt Agile. So, in this example, they're using Scrum. They have a backlog. There's a Scrum team, product owner, Scrum Master, team. Not development team, because they're not really doing development. This backlog has change initiatives. Right? It has impediments, blockers, issues that only senior management can eliminate. And they do sprints. And each sprint, their goal is to work on items in that backlog. So teams down here have a problem. They take the problem and they put it in the backlog for the executives to fix. And so they're using Agile to help adopt Agile. You don't have to use Scrum. You can use Kanban. Right here, a very simple Kanban board. The backlog of issues or changes. Engage are the ones that we will work on next. Execute the ones that are being worked on right now. Ones that need to be verified and done. So we could manage the transition work, the flow of the transition work using a Kanban system. I've done both of these with companies just to help manage the overall transition. Questions on that? Okay. Don't worry. No voy a tratar de explicar este. This took 5 minutes to do. I went onto the internet and I searched for Agile transition frameworks. And I copied all the pictures and I pasted them on the side. The whole point was to show you there are many companies that offer a very, what we say in English, cookie cutter. Or to make cookies, right? Just the same thing again and again. And they have these frameworks. I'm not going to try and explain any of these. I don't know any of these. My point is, I've never gone into one company and tried to use exactly the same approach that I used at another company. Every company is unique. Your companies have a unique culture, right? Unique people, unique processes. I won't talk at all about those. I just wanted to show that there are many of these approaches out there. What about this? The scaling frameworks. Are those familiar? Many people know this one. Which one's this? Safe. What about the top one? All the way up. Less, right. From its scale, right on. That one? Next. Nicely done. Anybody know that one? That. Yeah. They all have weird names, don't they? So there's all these scaling frameworks. So oftentimes when I get a call or an email saying, "Can you help my company transition?" Almost always in the same email, it'll say, "Can you help my company transition to safe? Can you help my company transition to less?" Or one of the others. And the end result is that I'll help you do Agile in your organization. Almost never do they end up doing specifically one of those. They may start with one of those, leverage some core ideas, but they don't end up there. Right, if you went to Fitbit and you said, "What is the Fitbit process?" They would say, "We have a Fitbit Agile process, loosely based on SAFe, and the training's done by Ken Rubin." Right? So I help them do this. They put together their own unique approach. That's every company I've ever visited. Right? They may use 20% of the ideas in one of these. So, the people who provide these frameworks actually provide a roadmap. Some of them do. Have you seen this picture? This is for SAFe. So for companies that want to adopt SAFe, Scaled Agile, the company, right, that provides SAFe, provides a roadmap of what you should do in order to adopt SAFe. Again, I'm sure there are some companies that do this. Most companies that I encounter do not do that. They take ideas from different frameworks, the ones that are most appropriate for their organizations, and they use those. But there are frameworks. If you think about it, this is how I see most companies doing it. Yes, you review existing frameworks. You select from those frameworks the ideas that will work. You mine the frameworks, taking good ideas out of it. You create a first pass of your own company's framework, what you think would work, and you try that, and then you learn. And then you revise the framework, and you learn again. It's Agile, right? We're constantly learning how to do it. So we continuously inspect and adapt. This is how I see companies successfully doing Agile at scale. But sure, they may start with this framework. I'll give you an example. I see every other company do. Let me pause. Questions? So what's the scope? How big should your transition be? When I get asked to visit a company, I'm not there to convince the company that Agile is a good idea. They're already comfortable with Agile. I don't get a call saying, "Convince my company to do Agile." Usually they're already doing Agile. What they're trying to do now is do Agile at large scale. They may be already doing it with a team or two teams, but now they need it to be bigger. So they already have some form of pilot project. A few teams, they've already decided on choosing a good pilot project. Maybe they've done this initial project. It was reasonably successful. And they said, Agile looks good, let's do it with many teams. So that's the starting point for this conversation. Not convince them to do Agile, but help them do Agile at scale. I hope you agree with the next slide.
I have a question. From reference, what I heard is that some companies, in fact, had some small teams doing Scrum or something like that, and they not, oh, it works. Okay, oh, cool, it works, and they decide to go bigger, but when they start going bigger, they don't use the lessons from the small teams, and they try a new set of consultancy and so on, but no, they don't. The experience was only for say, okay, it works, but not using the lessons.
That's unfortunate, right? So I'll give you an example. Companies like Yahoo, right? Yahoo may be their 5th attempt at doing Agile. Why? Because they start, they learn, and then there's a change in senior management.
Mm-hmm.
And so when the previous senior managers leave, all the ideas, all the knowledge goes, and they start again. They have to start learning all over again because of the changes. This is a horrible idea. We've spent real time and real money to learn and then throw it away. It makes no sense. So the only thing I can say is that's unfortunate. We shouldn't do that, right? If you did it with a few teams, right, this picture here, we should leverage the knowledge here. And as I'm saying here, if you can't do Agile at small scale, you have no hope of doing it at large scale. Question?
I'm not sure if it's the same thing. What about the companies? They think they want to be agile, but they don't understand the trade-off or the change. They only want the benefits to do agile, but they don't really understand what is the trade-off, what is the change to do it, to really do agile.
Yeah.
Usually that's the case with many big companies.
I think that's true, right? Everybody wants the benefits. Get to market faster,
Yeah,
better quality, happier employees.
really change.
Yes, of course, adapt to change quickly in the marketplace. Everybody wants that. So if senior management is not willing to invest their time, their help to make it successful, will fail. A good transition goes both ways. Bottom up, top down. If all you go is bottom up, eventually you'll hit the ceiling. You can't go up any further. So I've been involved in some Agile transitions that did not succeed because senior management, when things got difficult, they didn't want to participate anymore and the effort failed. So if you want to be successful, then senior management has to align on core Agile principles. So when I go to train a company, when I go to a company, the first thing I do with senior management is I train them on core Agile principles. Those pillars you saw before, that's the first step. Because if they can't align on that, we'll fail. I call that the Agile mindset. Right? So they have to have the right kind of way of looking at it. Once we get the principles in place, I have a better chance. I won't always succeed. Because sometimes when things get difficult, senior management wants to go back to what they did before.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We've all seen that. Additional questions like this? Follow-ups to that? Please.
I was thinking the way I'm seeing how the companies are adopting something like Agile. They don't have maybe they don't want to wait many time to learn. They want to learn in a few months. Because what I see in some companies, they start with a few agile teams, but in half a year they have 30 teams. I don't know how they can schedule 30 teams in half a year.
It may be possible to scale to 30 teams in a year, maybe.
Half a year.
Half a year, okay? Maybe less. Overall, there's only so much we can compress the schedule. In English, we have a saying, 9 women won't make a baby in a month. Everybody, my wife might have been happy about that. get 8 of her, amigas together, right? And in 1 month they have the baby. It doesn't work that way, right? So I can't compress certain schedules down. It just won't work. So there's a natural amount of time necessary. Change doesn't happen very quickly with a lot of people. It takes time for change to happen, to take root in what we're doing. So my guess is if they try to go too fast, they'll fail. They'll fail, right? Things won't work. People will get frustrated and they'll stop. That's unfortunate, right? So I think you have to have a reasonable expectation for how quickly you're going to do this. Right? For some of these companies I've mentioned, Fitbit and Audible and others, I started working with Fitbit November of 2015. So 3.5 years now. They're not fully there. Audible's been 2 years. I've been spending the past 2 years at a bank, one of the largest banks in the United States. My guess is we'll be working on this for another 2 years, not a half a year. It would never work. Just to get all the different departments aligned, I'm going to show you why in a moment. At scale, you won't compress the schedule as much as anybody wants. Follow-up questions to this. This is very important.
I have a question.
Sure.
At some point you mentioned that the first thing that you do is to train the upper management so you can share the mindset.
Yes.
So in your experience, how can be the time frame, in which time frame you can make people understand the mindset? I mean, it can take short time, it can be a long time, but in your experience, what is that time frame?
So there's 2 parts to that. The first is how long does it actually take to train them on the mindset? Very quick. A couple days. That's the easy part. The hard part is for them to start doing it. I mean, let me ask you a question. At any company you've ever worked at, any company, have you felt like you've been working on too many projects at the same time? Too many projects. That's my experience. Now, I can explain to management why that is a very bad idea, right? Why that we have too much whip in the system, too much work in process in the system. I can walk them through that. I can show that to them. They'll all be saying, yes, yes, you're right. And then they'll immediately go off and keep doing it, right? So the mindset's simple to get them there. To actually start using it and making hard decisions. The hard decision here would be, rather than working on 40 projects at one time, when we only have the capacity to work on 10, let's stop working on 40. But they won't initially. Why? Because somebody wants us to see that we're making progress on all 40 projects, even though it's very, very small progress on each one. Rather than making fast progress on 10, moving the teams over to the next set of projects, and actually getting more work done in a year at a higher quality level. Intuitively, they know it's right, but initially they won't do it. That's where the long time comes in. So that's not a couple of days. That could be months or longer, or never. Maybe never. Other questions like that? are all the different departments in a larger organization. Just some. There could be many more. I call this the value chain. Just the overall picture of the company. Usually, when Agile enters a company, it enters here. Right? Development, IT, things like that. So that's the natural place for Agile to start. That's okay. But now you have a question. Is it all of the development or IT? What if you work at a very large company? The bank that I'm working with now, 6,000 people in that organization. So should we start with all 6,000 people? That'd be all of that IT. Maybe it's just a particular department. So not all of it, maybe just a department of 100 people. We have to make this choice, right? Maybe it's a specific product. Maybe we work on multiple products and the initial focus will be just that product. Not these. Could be that. Or a value stream. A different way. If you do a lot of safe work, then maybe you focus on an individual value stream. So we have to make that decision. But I'm going to argue that's not enough. Okay, this is not the actual picture. I'm not allowed to show the one for the company I'm working with now, but this is similar to theirs. The actual one, if I showed it to you, the number of Post-it notes would be 3 times as many as on this picture. But here's what I want you to see. This is the full value stream for what we call ideation. Alguien tiene la idea en un producto, algo así. First partial delivery. Not the whole thing, just the first piece of the delivery. In this example, it took 14 months from somebody had the idea to the first delivery. So usually, I do a value stream map as one of the first activities at any company that I visit. Now notice in this picture, IT activities are here. Business activities are here in this picture. So if all we did was focus on dev or IT from a transition point of view, here, that's all we would focus on. Which means we missed the biggest part, which was the business side of this, not being agile. So 14 months. Now, when you do these value stream maps, every time I've done one, every time, 90% of the time or more, the work in that picture is blocked. It's not moving. It's sitting idle in a queue, waiting for some other team to do that. That should scare you. Right? Imagine that at your company, someone had an idea. Maybe a customer asks you for something, and you say, yes, we'll do that. Take out a stopwatch, click, time is running, click, and you deliver. What this says is from click, click, 90% of the time, nothing is happening. The work is sitting idle in a queue somewhere. This is every time I've done this at a large company. So imagine, back to our conversation about teams, if someone said to you, please come to my organization and help my Scrum teams be 10% more efficient. I'd say, really? That's the problem you want to solve? Do the math. 90% of the time, the work isn't moving. That means 10% of the time, teams do valuable work. If we improve the teams by 10%, that would mean overall we had an improvement of 1%. 10% improvement of 10% of the work is a 1% improvement. If we improve the flow across the whole picture, 10%, you'd immediately get a 9% return. 90% of the time, the work's not moving. I'd immediately get a 10 or 9% improvement. We're watching the wrong thing. So it's not about idle workers. The economic damage is caused by idle work. The work sits idle. Not that the workers, the people, are idle. It's the work that's idle that causes the problem. So when you think about adopting Agile, if all we thought about was keep the people over here busy and make them more efficient, it's not really going to give you a very large return, which is why the scope has to include the business when you look at a transition to Agile. And initially, most companies don't do that. They focus on the IT team, which, as I said, is here. That's not where the problem is. The problem is the whole picture. So, feel free to ask questions. This is a critical piece.
So, why many times when the people think about Agile, many people don't think about secretaries, then many people don't think about middle management. Mostly the people put all the pressure on the dev teams.
Yes. I think that's true, and I think business people believe Agile is a technical thing.
Mm-hmm.
You go do it. We can still do things our own way, but you go be Agile. I'm hoping that you agree that's not true. If they don't embrace Agile, if they don't use Agile across all of this, you won't get the value. All those things of go faster to market, be able to adapt to change quicker, build higher quality, you won't get any of that if you just focus on teams.
But many times that implies give freedom to the dev teams. For example, you need hire someone to be team, but you should be passed for all the process to the company, maybe 2-3 months to hire something, but your team need that guy now.
Mm-hmm. So agreed, right? If the processes that surround how we're doing Agile don't work very well, it'll be a problem for us. Those are the types of items that would move up into that product backlog for the executive team to work on. Why does it take 3 months to hire the people that we need for our team? It's slowing us down. Right? So that's senior management's responsibility to address those kinds of issues. This is why it's the whole picture that matters. And by the way, we should hire people, we'll put them on teams, and trust that they will do the right work. If I hired you into my company and I don't trust you to do the job, then I made a mistake. I shouldn't have hired you. I either trust you or I don't trust you. If I do, then hire you. And remember, teams are self-organizing. Right? They're not micromanaged. Other questions? Okay, that was an important piece. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this next slide. I'm just trying to show you examples of where, like different organizations, there's a problem, there's a disconnect in what's happening. Marketing. Marketing might say things like, we need to know the complete set of features on the first day of this and exactly the day you'll finish. Well, we've already said that's nearly impossible for us to do, right? With all the uncertainty. Right? Operations, releases at their own frequency. Right? Sales, maybe the sales team keeps asking us to do more and more work, more projects, limited capacity, too much WIP, right? Things like that. You see the idea. So to get the real end-to-end Agile, we have to address all of this, which is why you can't compress that schedule very fast. Because groups like legal, HR, it takes time for them to adapt. Okay. Questions? I'm going to transition here. Please.
About how do you start to
that transformation in all vertical in a vertical way with not only the development teams, also the management. For example, the human resources, they have a different mindset. To change that is very difficult.
That's what I'm going to discuss next. Let's discuss it. Unit of focus, I apologize. It's even a weird term in English. But it means we need to decide what will be our focus for the transition. Let me show you what I mean. We can focus on different things. Most organizations that I visit, they focus on projects. Right? I mean, if I go into most companies, they'll show me all the different projects that they're working on, all the projects that they want to work on in the future, projects. I am suggesting that is a very, very bad unit of focus. Horrible unit of focus. All right, so if we're not going to, and I'm going to explain why. But so if you don't have projects, I mean, because think about, here's what I mean by unit of focus. We budget based on that, right? Every project has its own budget. Teams get aligned with projects. Reporting happens at a project level. It is the unit of focus for the organization. We could consider products as a unit of focus. So rather than think about individual projects, and projects are bad for a unit of focus because projects start, projects end. That's the whole point, right? They have a start date, they have an end date. Products, on the other hand, or something like that, have a long life. At the bank that I'm working with right now, some of the products have been around for 40 years. They may have done hundreds of projects against that product, but the product's been around for 40 years. Projects start, projects end. If you don't like products, maybe it's capabilities. The capabilities that our organization offers, or value streams, or journeys, customer journeys. You know, in a lot of organizations, that's a very good unit of focus, a way of organizing for budgeting, planning, resourcing. So you need to determine in your company what is the proper unit of focus. What makes it difficult? Company. If I asked you, what are your products? Could you answer that question? What are your products? Is Amazon.com a product? Or is the search capability a product? Is the checkout facility a product? Is the payment facility a product? Is the ability to give reviews? Is that a separate product? Or are those just all pieces of one larger thing called Amazon? I mean, when I go to Amazon, I don't go to Amazon to buy search. I use search to find the product I want to buy. So search doesn't seem to meet the criteria of a product. The obvious criteria. You would pay money to get it, right? Pay money, get a product. Search seems to fail that. So is that not a product? Should Amazon have one product backlog for all of Amazon.com? Or should there be a separate search backlog with search teams, search budgeting, search planning? You see my point? What are the products? In our world today, it's not so clear. What are your products? At the bank where I'm doing work right now, it took us 2 months of pretty much full-time effort to figure out what are the products. It's not clear. So you're going to need to do the hard work to find the unit of focus. And to all those questions earlier about how do we get the different organizations to move over, how do we do budgeting? Once you determine the unit of focus, what are the products as an example, or what are our capabilities, or what are the value streams? Then we can choose one of them. Start with that. And all the organizations that touch that have to start small way, moving over to support that one. That was a lot. I mean, pause. Questions. This is absolutely critical, and most companies fail immediately here because they stay here. They stay with projects. You have to get away from projects. So, preguntas? Please.
Yeah, there are some products that are easy to see, like in a bank you have like credit cards, and that's a product. But you're telling that maybe for Amazon, the search itself is a product. In that kind of situation, how do you identify one of those?
I'm glad you asked that question. I'm not going to try and go through all this. I will happily make all this available. I have a blog on my website that takes this and describes this in detail. What I'm listing here are the characteristics that I think make for a good product, capability, value stream, a unit of focus. Has to be right size. The whole company, that's a bad unit of focus, right? So it's got to be smaller than that. Individual methods on an object, way too small, right? So somewhere right in between. I got to be able to control the money. I should be able to budget against this. I should be able to report how money is being spent against it. It should be isolated. If you're a product over here and you're another product here, there should be minimal dependencies across these two. So when you need to do work on your product, you have all the people right here who can do that work. You don't need any people over here. So minimize dependencies. It's the dependencies that kill us. That's why 90% of the time, nothing's happening. We set up so many dependencies across so many teams. We have to stop doing that. So it has to be isolated. Obviously, it has to be valuable. You want your products or capabilities to be valuable to end customers. There's a few more. I should be able to name and dedicate the people to that product. So once I define the product, I can tell you exactly which people work on that product, so the teams align with it. The backlog that we create is cohesive. All the items in the backlog make sense to be in that backlog together. And I can identify a single product owner that oversees that area. So using these criteria, you can do this. To your comment about credit cards, the group at the bank I'm working with is the credit card group. I promise you, this is not the product. This is way too big to be the product. From a customer's point of view, from a credit card group, this is the product. Right? The piece of plastic in my wallet. This isn't it. This card, to process transactions across it and all the other aspects in the bank, will touch 130 different large systems on the back end. There's no way we can use this as the product. Way too big. It'll fail the first criteria up there, right? It's not right sized. It's way too big. I'll give you an example of what a product looks like here. Rewards and benefits.
Okay.
Please.
Yes, going back to software, sometimes we can believe that a product could be like Photoshop, Lightroom, Word. They could be products by themselves, but in fact, each module will be a product. By example, you can have the administration module, you can have the font size module, you can have the canvas module, and so on. And yes, you say that there will be certain isolation, but sometimes there could be a strategic reason to make a complete redesign overall and so on, and because of that, certain dependency could emerge by sometimes, and later you can having back the isolation, but sometimes certain dependency will emerge.
Right. We will not eliminate all dependencies, which is why, what this is saying, it's implied by the cohesive. We're minimizing dependencies. We're not trying to eliminate them. I just need to know that when you come together to plan, you're not relying on them to do important work for you. The issue, I mean, take Microsoft Office as an example. Is Microsoft Office the product? Or is Word a product? Is Excel a product? What about PowerPoint? Is that a product? I mean, last time I checked, you know, most people buy Office. You don't buy Word or Excel. Technically you can. If you go, I do training for Microsoft as well. They told me, you know, you can go to the Microsoft website and buy individual apps. But that's not how most people get it. They buy Office. So from a customer's point of view, Office is the product. But should that mean, does that mean there's one backlog for all of Office? By the way, Microsoft told me, 3.500 personas work on Office. Do you really think you have 3,500 people working from one product backlog? Probably not. So the way we get around this, the largest Scrum effort I was ever involved with was with Nokia. We had 2.500 personas trabajando juntos el mismo producto. 2.500. All right, so they were building a phone, obviously. So the phone's the product, right? From a customer's point of view, there's a product, and that's that phone that you buy. So should you organize everything around that? Well, the reality is there's other pieces there that we're going to call products, even though they fail the principal test of what's a product. Will a customer pay for it? For example, the web browser on the phone. Nokia had 8 teams that worked on the web browser in the United States. Now, you didn't go into the store and buy a Nokia web browser, but it was a part of the phone. You wouldn't buy a smartphone if it didn't have a web browser, right? So, but we treated the web browser like its own product because one simple thing was true, and this is the critical piece that could help you get past this problem. We asked ourselves, would the items in the product backlog of web browser be valuable to the end customer? And if the answer to that was yes, then we treat it like it's a product, even though it really isn't. You don't go buy the web browser. The same thing with the audio-visual player, the AV player on the phone, play music, play videos. Again, you have to have one on the smartphone or nobody would buy the phone. But you don't sell it separate. But we treated it like a product. So those would be, they would meet these criteria. We align teams with them, we budget against it, we plan against it. That's what you need to do with any company that you work with on their transition. Figure out what's the right unit of focus, identify them. Like for that credit card, 15 products. We identified 15 products, none of which was the whole card, because that's too big, but 15 pieces of that we thought make good products. And what did we do? We started with one. Just one. And we took all the people necessary to work on that one product, and that was 300 people. And we brought them all together into one thing that we called a product group. And they were all aligned under one product owner. And then we did it with the next product. And next month, we're doing it with the third product. And every couple months, we're launching a new product. That's how we do this at scale. Comments on that? Again, you can get all this text from the blog post. Please.
So I have a question. If you have experience about looking at a company, defining that you need a focus and test it out and realize that it wasn't a good idea, for example, thinking about customer journeys. And they try that and they did identify that the way they're right now like distributed or organized have too much dependency. So they decide, well, probably it's better to switch to a product definition.
Yep.
Like that.
Absolutely happens. It does happen that way. Not always, but I've been involved where it happened. The issue with a customer journeys tend to cut across multiple lines of business. Right, take a credit card, take a bank. So I'll give you an example of what could be a customer journey. What's called claims and disputes. I look at my credit cards, like, I didn't make that charge. That's not my charge. And so I want to call up somebody and say, I didn't buy that, not my charge. Well, that's one example, but someone else goes, I have a mortgage with the bank. That's wrong. That's the wrong charge against my account. Someone has an auto loan, a car loan with the bank, same thing. So the ability to dispute a charge cuts across multiple lines of business. So now what you're trying to do is make a unit of focus that goes across all these lines of business. Things get very complicated very fast. And you have to start pulling people from multiple lines of business and bring them together. In certain companies, that's very difficult to do. And they may start there and then say, okay, we need to back off from that for a moment. So right now, a lot of companies, they'll create the products within a line of business. It's easier to manage those. Less dependencies that go out. But customer journeys might be the right idea to go across all the lines of business, so as an example. Okay, I'll take us a little further. This will probably be the last section we have time for. A hybrid operating model. So if your organization has very few constraints, right? So if the scope of your transition is small, maybe we're a small company of 100 people, right? And the unit of focus, whatever we're going to focus on, is simple to understand, easy to adopt, then don't worry about the company. You won't immediately be able to change everything because other commitments are already there. And we have to make sure those commitments get met. That make sense? All right, we're not done though. And we're not going to transition all the different products, all the different units of focus at the same time. I mentioned in the credit card group, we did the first product. And then sometime later we'll do the next one. Well, there's still these dependencies that can exist. They were already there. That's why it took all the 14 months to get anything done, and 90% of the time nothing was happening, because it looks like this. Well, it still looks like this. All we did is we took one of these, pulled it out, said we'll make that a product. So we have to work in this world. Hybrid here means some of it's agile, some of it is not agile, in the same company. And we have to make this work, because we can't immediately change it. Then you have this problem. Most organizations have created a lot of component teams and very few feature teams. If your organization is primarily composed of component teams, I promise you, 90% of the time or more, your work is blocked and will not move. That's like a fact. So that means you're going to have to restructure your teams. You got to restructure them away from component teams and move them towards feature teams. Well, that's a problem, right? Because think about it. I'll show you an example. Here's a company I worked with several years back. They had approximately 95 teams. They wanted to move over to Agile. They'd already done the pilot project. Agile worked for a small number of teams. Now they wanted to do it with everybody. Geo here means geography. So they worked across 6 different geographies. Application teams, shared services. So most of the teams over here are all component teams. So you run into this immediate question of, well, if we're transitioning to Agile, should we convert all those teams from component teams to feature teams. Well, what about the work those teams are currently doing? Trying to get releases out the door. There's a risk. There's a risk that if we change the teams in the middle of the release, that we may not get the release done. And it assumes that we have knowledge we may not have. The VP of the group, the vice president of this group, when I said we need to start converting teams, his question was this: great, tell me exactly what the new team structure ought to look like. On the first day, the day we have the worst possible knowledge we'll ever have, tell me right now exactly what the new teams ought to look like. That's a problem. I don't know. So we're going to do it incrementally. We're going to learn each day on how better to do this. So we have this problem as well. What I'm trying to show through all these examples is if you work in a large company, you won't immediately transition to Agile. You can't. There's too many problems to do it immediately. So let me stop there and just open it up for questions, because the last few sections I didn't think we'd get to anyway. Sure. Let's have a discussion. Please.
What do you think about how to start? You say if you can start in small agile teams, you cannot afford to make a large scale about it on all the company. But what happens when usually biggest transformations come from top-down approach? So C-level, middle management want to be agile, but the dev teams or the teams doing the products, they don't embrace the agile mindset. They don't do they don't looking for technical excellence. They don't look for quick deploy or ship the things in a quick way. But the problem is when you go to one approach about bottom up, many times dev teams don't have support to middle management or C-level. So how is work?
So the way you describe that, there's problems both directions.
Yeah.
And the top-down approach, if management goes to the teams and says, you need to go Agile immediately, my first comment would be, great, thank you for your support, right, in doing this, and we will begin the process, the journey of moving down that path. And we'll go at a reasonable pace. No faster than we should, no slower. And hopefully they'll understand that, again, 9 women don't make a baby in a month, right? It's not going to go that fast. If the development teams don't want to be Agile, then we're probably not going to succeed, right? And here's the good news, at least. I can't speak to Peru. This is my first time here. Had a great time, thank you. Right? But certainly in North America, it tends to be a smaller percentage of people who don't want to do this. There are always people like, no, Agile, not something I'm interested in doing. And they may choose to do something else. But that's not a large percentage. Again, I can't speak for Peru, but in the US, I've had people talk about 30%. That's ridiculous. I've never seen anything even close to 30%. Occasionally you'll see some people, I don't want to do it. Middle management is a slightly different issue. Yeah. Right? And that, I think, is universal. Because in many companies, if I'm a middle manager, I'm not executive, but I'm not here, I'm here. A lot of times middle managers value themselves on how many people report to them.
How many horses I have.
Right, how many horses I have. And the moment you start restructuring and potentially fewer people report, there's always an issue there, right? So that's just universal. And you're right, we have to deal with that. Right? And some of those people may not be very happy with the end result, but it's what's best for the company. And that's our goal. Remember, in Agile, you optimize at the system level, not the individual team level. You have to optimize them all. Other questions? Please.
It's correct when you say that most of the transformations start with IT, because currently all the budget for all development goes to IT and then goes to other areas. Okay? When you find a partner in another area, what is your experience? In my experience, the most common way is to enable a transformation is going through HR, because at the end they value all the values, okay, that the framework has or agility has. Okay, they value that, and they want to adopt those the same values, okay, to the company, because at the end of the day they are valid for everybody, right? So HR is one of the key members of each one of the teams I have been working on. I don't know your experience. You have experience with other kind of teams, other kind of business areas that also adapt to this.
So I do agree with HR. I found them to be good partners in transformations. They're rarely a problem. They're usually a friend when it comes to the transition. Where things get more complex is with groups like sales, marketing. Right? Sales wants to keep selling, right? And if you're a company that builds products when your sales team sells, that means more and more work keeps getting pushed onto the teams, and we run into that problem of too much demand, not enough capacity, right, to do it. So we have to work with sales and that. Marketing, I don't fault marketing. I mean, take Fitbit, for example. When a new device is coming to the market, they have to get television ads ready, print ads ready, right, email campaigns ready, real work with real deadlines and real money. They have to pay to secure these spots. So they're asking questions like, I need to know what features are going to be on the device so I know what I put in the TV commercial. It's like, okay. Now they're asking for that on the first day. Well, we may have to make some changes, right, based on engineering constraints, other things. So they're harder to work with because we need to find a place where we can say, here's what we know today that you can be sure will be there. We're not sure about this, and get them to understand the uncertainty of the process. So that's harder to deal with. So there are groups like finance, budgeting. I mean, budgeting is horrible for most companies. In the US, the common approach, in September, they're trying to figure out the entire budget for the next year. And they're trying to determine every project, every dollar, and where they'll be spent.
Mm-hmm.
And it's worse than that, because I will hold you accountable for each dollar that gets spent. And if I don't like it, I'll pull you into my office for a conversation. Now I have to go tell these people, you need to budget in an agile way. That's a very big change in most companies. They don't budget in an agile way. They budget project at a time, and they define all the projects a year ahead of time. And now we're saying, don't do that. Fund the unit of focus, fund the product. Don't fund the projects. Fund the product, or fund the capability, or fund the value stream. And then let the product owner determine how to spend that money within that area. That's a big change. So yeah, there's organizations like that that are much harder than HR. Much harder. What else?
I guess a traditional approach to agile transitioning is the most common way for executives, which are have the mindset of fixed everything, fixed budget, everything, and PMOs and everything is the most common way. In your experience, which are the type of companies that are more open to an agile way to transition into agile? It's an open question, but
I'm not sure there's any one type of company. I think it's more the people at that company. I'm going to give you an example. I'll do the best I can to communicate what I saw. And visiting a company, that company, by the way, that picture, and I'm with their executives. So their budget for the year for IT is $150 million. So big, a lot of money. And they started describing, their chief financial officer starts describing how they do budgeting. And he's speaking for 15 minutes in amazing detail, a lot of detail about how they do budgeting, but how they plan each project, they have the project plan, they have the dollar budget against the plan, all this stuff. He goes on and on and on for 15 minutes. I listened, and then I asked my favorite question. I said, how is that working for you? And I don't know if you've ever been in a conversation where you ask a question and nobody says anything, and it feels very uncomfortable. For me, it felt like it was minutes. It was probably only about 15 seconds. Nobody said anything. Everybody's looking around the table. It's all senior executives. And at the same moment, everybody starts laughing. Laughing loud. I said, okay, if your response to the question of how is this working is you start laughing, maybe we can now get past this. Right? Their point was, they thought they'd spend 15 minutes telling me this great approach they had to budgeting. And when I asked them how it was working, they started to laugh. It was that bad. Like, so why should we continue to do this? So I had to get them to recognize that I understand you have a very well-defined approach, but it's not working for you. So that at least gives me the opportunity to have a conversation with them to discuss how to do it in a different way. That's how I deal with them at that level, because budgeting is nasty. Everybody has their own approach. They all think it works. And I've been with companies that start budgeting in September for the year that starts in January. They're still doing budgeting in February. How is this a good idea? It's not working. Budgeting is one of the first things you have to address, but you need to define your products, your unit of focus first. That's the starting point for all of this. If you don't start there, you'll be back to projects again. Other questions?
If I know, sorry, my English not.
Yeah, ask in
not
Spanish.
good. But if I'm in a team, for example, my team has is not physically in the same place. For example, I have some developers in India. I have some testers in Lima. The hour is different, totally different. In this scenario, can I apply the agile thinking?
Yes. Agile thinking, yes. It's a bit more difficult. Tiene usted un equipo distribuido, ¿sí? Algunas personas en India, otros aquí en Lima. La diferencia de la hora es como 9:30 horas, algo así, entre los dos países. ¿Eh? Es muy larga. El problema con equipos así es el time zones. No es el problema que hay gente allá y gente aquí. El problema es el time zones. Si tengo usted personas aquí en Lima y también en los Estados Unidos, en Houston, están en el mismo time zone. No hay problema así. Porque tenemos que tener las reuniones a cualquier tiempo que queremos, porque estamos en los mismos time zones. Cuando tienes más de 9 time zones en diferencia entre los dos, es más difícil hacer ágil. Sí es posible, pero es mucho más difícil. Solamente porque los time zones. Entonces necesitas tecnología, algo así para ayudar, pero no va a arreglar el problema así, porque alguien va a comunicar en la medianoche, en una reunión, en una conversación. No hay una solución de esto. So, yes, You can be agile, but you'll be less agile with distributed teams. You still do it. Every big company has distributed teams. Every big company has that. That's common. Para mí es algo fantástico si encuentro una empresa donde toda la gente está en el mismo lugar. Es un buen día. No es normal. Other questions? Please.
Another scenario is when the agile teams are formed with different providers. The developers is from a provider, the testers are from another provider, but the whole team don't work for the company.
No me gusta así. No, think of how hard that is, right, to do. First of all, if they're contractors with another company, oftentimes I don't control when they join and when they leave. So all that knowledge in their head goes when they leave, right? I don't feel, it's hard to feel like a real team with people like that. A lot of companies do that. I understand the value of trying to save money, right? You know, offshore to a place where it's less expensive, right? I wonder if that's really the case, though, right? I would want to have teams all together and be employees if it were my choice.
From my experience, at least in 2 projects, having with contractors, a good way is that you have a core team, like say you have a 9 people team, but you have 3 or 4 that belongs to the company, and the remaining parts could be from different contractors, and you have to have the control in a certain way of the process or the interaction between them, but you always need a core part of your organization, and the rest, okay, they can be add and they can be jump in, jump off, but the core will be part.
I think you have to have that. The risk, if you had only contractors, is too great. I mean, the domain knowledge of the product that you're working on leaves with the contractors. Right? That's a very large risk to the company. I don't understand why companies would do that. All right? It would make me scared to know that if our contract terminated and those people left, critical knowledge leaves. And when they leave, if I have an 8-person team and 4 people leave, will you agree that we don't have the same team anymore?
Okay. Yeah,
so
but
all the historic velocity data, estimating data, everything we use for planning purposes with that team is no longer valuable. And I have to start all over again to create a brand new team. Teams need to live for a long time.
yeah, but what I'm saying is not the best idea, but it's a way to try to reduce the impact.
Agreed. I agree. By having the core stay in place, at least there's a core set of people with that knowledge that I know can be aligned. My goal, if it wasn't clear, was to align the 2 long-lived assets with one another. Asset 1, products, capabilities, value streams, whatever you call them. Asset 2, teams. Put them together. That's the critical piece for Agile. So I have teams that build deep knowledge against this product, and they work against it for a long time. These become high-performing Agile teams. The other scenario is we're not going to ever get high-performance teams. Please.
Maybe this is controversial or polemic, but what about the Agile professional layer? Many companies have the Scrum Master coaches or other are contractors. They are not from the company, but how that works?
So that was actually the next section. I won't go through the details. In larger transitions, it probably makes sense to bring, if the company doesn't have internal expertise, agile coach, roles like that, probably makes sense to bring that expertise in from outside. And then have the external coach act as a mentor to internal coaches to get them ready to do the job. And then the external coach should leave.
So, what about the other thing about technical teams? Many companies use contractors to technical teams. Maybe the idea or the plan should be the same. I hire high expertise to technical teams to teach, to coach my internal technical team.
Yes.
But many people don't do that. Many people it's like you go to the marketplace and buy some professional, sit here, make some code
And then leave.
and
Again, that approach does not work for me.
yeah.
It's not how I would do that. That's scary. I watched a team once, they had a test automation problem.
King.
But yet they're going to automate the tests, so you can easily make mistakes. None of our employees over here build any skills at all in doing automated testing because we hired third parties to come in and do the testing. There's nothing good about the solution, but we have to get it done fast. That was the argument. Right? So we'll bring in all these contractors, they'll automate all the tests, and then they'll leave. It's never going to work that way. Right? So I just think people think there's magic in doing this. The only real long-term solution is build the skills with your people, let them practice it every day, and they'll get very good at it. And we won't need, I'm not saying you shouldn't use contractors. I'm just saying use them thoughtfully.
It's like force speed.
So maybe time for one more question. There is one.
Do you think that a part-time pro owner can work?
No. No, I mean, if we walked through all the responsibilities of a product owner, I bet by the end of that discussion, some of you would say, I don't think one person can do that job. As opposed to saying, do it part-time. So no, unless it's a very, very small product. Oh, our company builds really small apps for an iPhone, and we have 10 of them, and one person is the product owner for 3. Maybe. But in an enterprise type system, no way.
I was thinking in small teams, small companies, who manage the budget of the product?
Small team, small company?
Or in bigger companies, it's a board, it's another management level. So the product owner only knows about the product backlog, or the features, or the release plan. But when you don't have that layer, who manage the budget in agile teams?
So product owner owns the economics. So if you're the product owner, you should have the ability to make important decisions on date, scope, budget. You own that. Now, you may not make all the decisions, right, in big companies, right? There could be the CEO who makes some of those. But you've been delegated responsibility to make decisions at your level of focus. So when I said that we took 300 people and we put them together into one product group for one product in the credit card area, the one person who is the product owner of this whole group has overall budget responsibility.
No, even in bigger companies.
Oh yeah, we're talking about a company of 6,000, a group of 6,000 people. You know, there's one CEO of that group. She owns everything. She told this guy, you get a budget of $10 million to run your group. I will hold you accountable for how you spend your money, but you can spend it in whatever way you think is best. And you don't have to define all your projects at the beginning of the year. Just
That's interesting because in companies many times the products have a budget, but the profit they produce don't bounce to the product. They back to the company. And if they need more money, it doesn't matter if they produce a lot of money. They should ask for more money. They cannot. They don't have the right to use the money they produce.
And that's fair. Just because, you know, my product produces a lot of money, you know, you would think that the company would want to make sure I had enough money to do the job, but it doesn't mean I get to spend the money I made. Right? No, but individual product owners should own profit and loss,
Yeah.
right, for their product, or they're not a true product owner, or things get weird. If I own, I want to build something, but you own all the costs. What's to prevent me from asking for everything? You have the cost, I don't have any of the cost, so I demand everything. So the person who gets the benefit should own the cost. That aligns the interest correctly. So you should get, if you get benefit, you own the cost, so you can make the right trade-offs. Do I want to do it? Do I not want to do it? If it's free to me to ask, I'll ask for everything. There's no cost. Give me the cost, it's a different issue. Let me say thank you. Gracias.